Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Venture Center's VCChat. This is one of many that we've done over the last 5 or 6 weeks as Groundhog Day rolls around yet another day here on a Friday. Thank you all for being with us. I'm Wayne Miller, and I'm the executive director here with my team, Ashley, Mimi, Becky, Nora, and others, and an extraordinary panel of folks that we're going to talk to today about a half a dozen questions around how the world is changing and how they're adapting their businesses and their leadership as it relates to how the COVID virus has affected so many of us. So I want to welcome, of course, Millie Ward, who's president of Stone Ward, who's with us today. We've got Phil Brandon, owner of Rocktown Distillery, who we've learned is now making throat sanitizer. Laura Landreaux, the CEO of Entergy, Arkansas, who is keeping the lights on, albeit particularly with the challenges of weather that have come through the state in the last couple of weeks. Hank Kelley, who's CEO of Flake and Kelley, keeping a roof over our head. And interested to hear from you, Hank, how this WFH, which is the new acronym for working from home, is affecting the business. Gretchen Hall, who's here as the executive director of the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau. Gretchen, thank you for being here. And last but not least, Jack Sundell, the owner of the Root Cafe, who has really changed the way he's doing business and keeping things afloat. So thank you all so much for being here, and for our audience today. This is a great opportunity. So I'd also be neglectful if I didn't also recognize and thank our sponsors, Wright Lindsay Jennings, Frost, and of course the Little Rock Chamber, who does such an extraordinary job of keeping the Venture Center in business day in and day out. So let me start, Millie, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind.
Okay.
The first question is, how has your business fared so far through this pandemic?
Well, I told someone the other day, it's been interesting because we are happy to have a diverse client list. So that means we have a couple of clients that it's been really hard. Our healthcare clients, have struggled through this. And anytime our clients struggle, we struggle. It's a chain. So that, and our Sport Clips client, they're a national franchise. They closed all 1,850 of their stores about 3 weeks ago through all the multiple shutdowns that were happening. So, that's catastrophic for a franchise. And so that's hurt. So some of that is, as you can imagine, what the times have demanded. But then we have some other clients who are just cooking. I mean, our Arkansas Game and Fish people, one thing you can do is still get outside. You can fish, you can hunt, you can enjoy the parks, the walking and the biking. So we've been doing a lot of interesting things for them. We put up a virtual nature center in 2 weeks when all their nature centers had to close. And that's gotten a lot of engagement from the public. So, I think we have a chicken chain who is having record sales every week, much like the RX catering people. So we have our ups and we have our downs, but for us, it kind of keeps it level, which is a good thing. And so far, we've managed to keep everything in place, keep our people in place, and be patient, as we go through these next couple of months.
Thank you. Phil, to you, first of all, thank you for the good work you have done to help keep us safe and converting to manufacturing hand sanitizer instead of your vodka, which I like very much, but also your bourbon. So I know we'd all rather be consuming the latter as opposed to the beginning, but thank you for doing that. But how is, obviously we have some understanding of how this has affected your business, but would love to hear more.
Right. So, we started making hand sanitizer, which has obviously been a big thing, but believe it or not, vodka sales and whiskey sales are up. People are buying from the liquor stores instead of from the restaurants and taking it home. So we're very lucky and very fortunate to have vodka sales and whiskey sales up, as well as being able to see if you can see that little hand sanitizer that we're making as well. Yeah. The FDA and the TTB, which are our governing bodies, put out temporary guidance to allow distilleries to make hand sanitizer to make up for the shortfall. So we've been able to continue to produce that, and they've extended that guidance out through the end of the year. So we're continuing to crank it out as fast as we can and help out as many people as we possibly can. So it's been good because I haven't had to lay anybody off. Everybody's working and getting paid. And we're able to pay our bills and do those types of things. So it's actually been very, very lucky for us.
Awesome. Thanks. How much hand sanitizer have you guys actually manufactured at this point?
Close to 10,000 gallons.
Wow.
Man.
So that's equivalent to about that's about the size of a fuel tanker, correct?
Yeah, they're 6,000 gallons, but yeah.
So 2 of those, that's amazing. Wow. I think I've used 5,000 gallons myself, but anyway.
You're very clean.
Yes. Well, you know, anyway, Laura, my gosh, we were talking earlier. You obviously have a lot of folks who work for you. You have the challenge of dealing with keeping the power on, literally, in places of the state that have been hit very hard recently by weather. Being able to have it to deploy those people, and at the same time, the challenge of keeping everybody safe. I don't know how you do it. Are you sleeping? I mean,
it depends on Mother Nature as to whether I'm sleeping.
So how are things at Entergy? And again, thanks for being with us.
Oh, absolutely. Happy to be here. Happy to share. You know, just focusing on our employees and the operations side of the business versus our customer side of the business, which is its own challenge. We've fared well. The lights are on, the power's flowing, and that's a good thing. And we understand that the service we provide is really the linchpin, the underpinning of all of society functioning throughout this. And we take that very, very seriously. And so we actually had a pandemic plan in place as part of our safety protocols, and we dusted that off in January and then put it into full implementation in March. But obviously it was woefully under developed based on what we're seeing today, and we've had to check and adjust that. It's certainly taking all kinds of precautions like the CDC guidance, the telecommuting of those that are able, but we've got field workers going out every single day, you know, putting their lives on the line to keep the lights on, and their safety and health and protection is really our number one priority. But as we were talking about, I'm very proud to say that we were able to restore over 128,000 customers after the Easter storms passed through without serious complications. And that's not to say that COVID didn't slow down the restoration. It certainly did. We talked about the lodging and the meal challenges that we faced. First thing when the sun rose on Monday morning, we had 3,000 employees we had to lodge and feed that week with either the hotel shut down, the restaurant shut down, or they didn't have power altogether. So that was a huge lift on top of a lift. But as I said, I'm proud to say that we have learned we can effectively manage a storm within a storm. So
thanks for what you all are doing. You know, I hesitate to say this, but I will. Can you all imagine if we didn't have the internet? So thank you, Laura. You know, it really, I mean, even if you wind the clock back 20 years, I mean, you know, think about this infrastructure day and having high-speed internet and how critical it is to this communication, obviously, we're doing today, which is a nice to have, but what about the need to have, right? What about the education, all the things associated with that? So thank you so much. Hank, to you, if you wouldn't mind. So how has your business changed through this pandemic?
Well, Wayne, it's taken a significant impact on our day-to-day operations, and our business is broken down into really 4 different categories. Most people think of us as commercial brokers and managers of property. And so, as an example, Laura's headquarters is in the building that I'm sitting in right now, and I've been in my office every day because we have a limited number of people in our office that are critical to the core operations of managing key properties. The good news about the brokerage business is real estate brokers, commercial and residential, have learned long ago to be remote, mobile, and work from the field. And so our conversion to working without having people in the office every day from the agency side of the business hasn't been that bad, except for the fact that no one wants to look at property during a pandemic. And so there is zero activity going on relative to the normal flow of people looking at buildings, renting buildings, and trying to make decisions about relocations because they don't want to be out in the field while this is happening. So what we converted our agents into thinking quickly is, this is the time that you work the phones to talk to your customers, to find out what their needs are that you can help solve when you can be physically with them. There have been some transactions that happened as a result of work that we did prior to the pandemic. We're lucky enough to be the agency of record for the Port of Little Rock, and so we were involved in the closing of the Amazon parcel that recently was announced, and so that helped prop up the brokerage revenue side of our business, that from the normal flow of people buying and selling and renting property is off. Now, from the property management side, we've had to work double time and twice as hard to clean facilities, to help provide some security in areas to make sure that people are accessing only with critical need. So we manage a fair number of medical related facilities, and part of those, the job that we've got there is to interact with a hospital that owns a medical facility that has clinical space in it. Now that the lifting of certain procedures is being lifted, we're busy helping those medical clinic facilities make sure that they're able to practice social distancing from everything from the way people enter the office to the way they are seated in the patient exam rooms, et cetera. And so we've been pretty busy with that. The impact psychologically on our workforce is probably no different than it's been on a lot of people's workforce, and that it's tough. We like being together. We are used to congregating, and I thrive on walking around my office, bopping in and out of people's offices saying, what's up here, what's going on there, what's going on here. And when you just break that down into the communication, email's great, phone calls are okay. You know, this form of communication, Zoom, is wonderful, but there is nothing that will ever replace, I hope, the ability of people to office and work together in a collaborative environment. So I'm in the business of providing spaces for people to collaborate. And so one of the things we're trying to think through is what does it look like for that space in the future? And we don't have the answer. We do not have the answer. But we know it will not be stacking people on top of each other again for a long time.
Yeah.
So those facilities that are call center or data center facilities where you've got 10 people per 1,000, I can't imagine those coming back and being repopulated in the same form that they were. So on one hand, that helps maybe spread some people out using more square feet in the facilities that we have. And on the other, this ability to communicate and this crash course we've had on mobility and the crash course we've had on remote operations, I think is a 10-year learning cycle compressed into about 3 months.
You know, that's so true.
So true.
As we entered this decade, there was a comment in an article I read in Forbes that talked about how this will be the decade where we define what remote work is all about. And I think we just did that in the last 6 weeks. So there's little question about that. And it's interesting, you know, I had a telemedicine call today. I needed a prescription refilled, and, you know, I was due for some blood work and stuff like that, and I did it over the phone, you know. So it's also forcing adoption of technologies that we've been hesitant to consider. So, you know, clearly that's the case. But one of the questions I'll ask you towards the end, and thanks for touching on that a little bit, is a little bit how our businesses will look at the end of this. But let me continue, if I could, just to move over to Gretchen. Gretchen, same thing. How's the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau managing through this pandemic?
You know, I think obviously all industries have been hit hard. I think the tourism and hospitality industry has been hit especially hard. Our attractions and museums are closed. Multiple hotels and restaurants are closed. Others are barely surviving. We've had hundreds of events and conventions cancel. And that's going to be a tremendous impact for Central Arkansas. Right now, the numbers, early numbers show that the restaurant industry is projected to lose about $180 million, and that's just in Central Arkansas. For hotels, that's another $45 million. For us at the Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau right now, we're projecting a revenue loss of $5.6 million. And unfortunately, I'm not sure that number's not going to end up being larger.
When do you, not when, because I don't think anybody knows the answer to that, but are you courageous enough to start thinking forward a little bit in terms of
absolutely,
beginning
absolutely,
to book and so forth, and yeah. Good.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking at all kinds of data right now, and the great thing is we've got a lot of data to look at from a lot of our industry partners and our national associations, and so we know we're settling into this temporary normal that we're in right now, and we're going to remain in that for quite a while longer. But the nice thing is people are starting to talk about recovery and rebuild, and so I can touch on that a little bit later as well. And so those conversations are ongoing. It's going to be a long, slow road to get there, but we are making plans now to capitalize on it.
That's great. Thank you. And Jack, I tell you, buddy, I owned 3 restaurants in my lifetime, and I just my team will tell you I get pretty emotional about the challenges that you guys are facing out there, because I don't think it could be much harder. But we're glad you're doing great, and we'd love to hear more about it. So thanks for being with us today, and we're all going to give the Root tons of support here moving forward. I promise.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here. It is a challenging time. I think the Root is faring pretty well through this, but I mean, doing great at this moment is just totally relative. I mean, it's hard to imagine a time in the past where sales would have been down 50%, and I would say that we're doing great. So we're learning every day. As Gretchen mentioned, this has hit tourism and, bars and restaurants especially hard. And I think it's a really sort of, ironic change when things like this have happened in the past. The restaurants and bars are places that people go to kind of connect and, find solace and, kind of encourage themselves to get through whatever problem it is. And, this time around, it's like restaurants and bars, are seen as one of the kind of most dangerous and hostile environments. And so it really it just totally changes the paradigm for dine-in focused restaurants. So looking at the Root for us, it's we've been doing curbside now for 5 weeks, and it's fluctuated quite a bit, but overall this 5-week period versus last year, we're down 46%. We've had weeks that were down as much as 59%. We've had weeks that were down as little as 36%. So, I think there's been a lot of fluctuation. This week seems to be trending up, and that may be because of stimulus checks. I read an article that said that we would see a bump from that. But again, it's just there's so many variables, and we're just kind of learning as we go. We've got about half of our staff working right now at the Root, but the ones that are working, some of them have reduced hours. I feel like we can sort of sustain what we're doing for the foreseeable future, but it's, we're still trying to figure out exactly, our profit margins on some of the new items that we're doing. It's just all so different than what it was a couple of weeks ago. And then at Mockingbird Bar and Tacos down the street, we made the decision at the very beginning to just close down there. We decided that it would be better for us to consolidate our resources, not to divide up our audience. The 2 restaurants are only about 2 blocks away from each other. Mockingbird's been open for a lot less time, a lot less name recognition, way less social media presence, which is huge during this time. So we have also a heavier reliance down there on bar sales. So that was another reason we decided to close. And then the fact that we don't have a parking lot there, for curbside, the luxury at the Root of having a parking lot for people to drive up to, and and if it takes us 10 minutes to get someone's order ready, if they get there earlier than expected, it doesn't cause this sort of chaos of people being out of order in a parking situation on the street. So So anyway, Mockingbird closed for the foreseeable future, but we're hoping to have it open within the month if our PPP funding comes through for that.
Have you benefited from the PPP or the IDL or the EIDL loans at all? Have you applied for those, and if so, have you had benefit from it?
We just got a PPP loan for the route yesterday. We just received those funds, so we'll see how that ends up benefiting us. I mean, it's obviously a benefit to have cash in the short term. So I think that's just, there's so much uncertainty around the forgiveness portion of that, and the loan documents actually said forgiveness rules have not been finalized. Sign here to say that you acknowledge that. And that the bank is not necessarily committing to any sort of forgiveness at this point because the rules are still being written. And then at Mockingbird, we received the $10,000 advance through the EIDL program, and we are applying for the PPP. But down there, we chose not to apply early just because the 8-week period following, receiving those funds is it doesn't make sense for us to receive those funds and then be closed for 8 weeks after it. And, in that case, we just end up replacing our employees' unemployment insurance with money from the PPP loan and sort of have nothing left over for the business to reopen once this is passed. So we're, I think like everyone, just trying to figure out the best moves day to day.
Gotcha. Thanks. Hey, moving to the next question, and thank you all. That was great. So, I think a little bit, I'm going to start with you, Phil, if you don't mind, and I think we understand a little bit of this, but there may be other things. What changes have you made, or what new services are you guys offering as a result of this? Obviously, we're certainly aware of the hand sanitizer. It sounds like consumption of alcohol is up. I know it certainly seems to, not that I know much about this, but it seems to be more expensive when you go to the liquor store. So there seems to be a little bit of a price increase. So I'm sure there's some folks taking advantage of that. But regardless, what else have you guys done to shift your services or offerings to your consumers?
Right. Well, the primary thing is hand sanitizer. I mean, that's we've already discussed it, but it's been huge, and the demand is outstripping supply, and we're doing everything we can to keep up in, finding raw materials and bottles to put it in, to distributing it out and having people come pick it up and all that sort of thing. And keeping up with the new rules and laws as the FDA changes almost weekly the guidance they put out. So obviously we got reduced hours. We used to be open as a bar as well. And so we're no longer operating a bar, but we are open as more like a package store where you can come in and buy the bottle, which has been great. Sales are still brisk for that, thank goodness. And the people that would normally be employed giving tours and tastings and making cocktails are now more, bringing people up at the retail counter and helping out in other ways in the back with production and with bottling. We still, run the bottling line every day and need people back there helping to bottle. So, we've managed to just add another, spoke to the wheel, so to speak, with the hand sanitizer and continue to crank it out.
That's awesome. I like, Gretchen, I like your term, which I haven't heard used before, is temporary normal instead of new normal. I don't think this is the new normal. So I'm going to adopt that if you don't mind.
We don't want this to be the new normal.
No, absolutely.
No.
That's my position. Exactly. Laura, how about you? Obviously, one of the challenges as we listen to the struggles of folks is, how do I pay my electric bill? So I would imagine that has had to be a way in which you have had to change your services or the way you look at your customers today. I don't know if that's obviously one thing. There may be others.
And no, absolutely. The first thing that we did when the governor declared the state of emergency, and all utilities essentially did this, was suspend disconnections for non-payment so that nobody was without power during the state of emergency. And that has been extended by the Public Service Commission until further notice. And so all customers should know that regardless of their payment stability, that their power will continue to flow. But we recognize that when things start to reopen and perhaps that state of emergency is lifted, that our customers, both residential and obviously the commercial side of the customers, are going to be facing significant financial hardship, and their electric bill is going to be part of that financial equation. So we are a regulated utility. We operate under rules and regulations by the Arkansas Public Service Commission. And under those rules, we have the ability to offer some flexible payment arrangements. And so we're looking at ways that we can reach out to customers proactively with those solutions, and then look at ways we can perhaps expand what we already have into new solutions for customers, so that they will have some breathing room upon reopening and not have that late payment hanging over them as the barrier to economic recovery. So we are very cognizant that we are dependent on our community as our lifeblood. So we want to do what we can to help them.
Thank you for doing that. It has the I would imagine, based on what's occurred, that things like your call centers and how you communicate with your customers, demands there have probably increased dramatically. Is that a fair statement? Or?
Well, certainly with we have seen a greater online traffic than we've seen in the past. Bill payment assistance through online payment channels, as opposed to customers walking into payment centers. We've seen a shift towards that. We actually have much of our call centers working from home now, which is, at least they're functioning well. But we do anticipate that once customers are reaching out with asking for help on payment for their electric bill, we will have to increase the number of call center agents that we have in order to handle that increased call volume that we anticipate coming through.
So in spite of the obviously the current unemployment economics and numbers in the state, it's interesting because the number of people that we've spoken to suggest that as we get through this, there'll be an increase in the need for a number of jobs. So, hopefully that'll turn around pretty quick. I mean, we were at very low unemployment numbers, obviously, before this, and this was such a binary shutdown, So, Hank, you've touched on this a little bit as well in your world, but you make the point that this was normal to some extent for you in terms of the fact that, you have a team that's accustomed to working remotely. Obviously, you and I share a similar style from the standpoint of walking around management. Mimi and Becky and Ashley will tell you, we all work in an open environment, but I do like to wander around and talk to each of them because I care about them. I want to know what they're doing and how we can work together. So that's always something we do. But has this created any need for new services for your organization as it relates to Flake and Kelley?
I wouldn't say they're completely new, Wayne, but the emphasis on lease deferral requests and loan deferral requests have dominated the last 5 weeks of those of us that manage properties. And so think about the flow of funds that goes on with a typical commercial property. A tenant occupies the space, they pay rent, we deposit the rent, and we pay the operating expenses for that facility that might include an electric bill, a water bill, a janitorial bill, a security bill, a landscaping bill, and other bills that follow property ownership. And then we get to pay for that owner normally a mortgage payment, because very little of the commercial property that we deal with is debt-free. And so when a major tenant notifies you that they're not able to pay rent, then when you look downstream, there are people we're trying to keep employed that service the properties, and there are also banks that are expecting us to pay the mortgage payments on time. Now, I will say this, partially because of this entire stimulus package, our banks have been partners to us. They have reached out to us and said, if you're having trouble with your primary tenants paying their rent, we'll work a deferral of your interest payments. So we've offered, when requested, deferral plans for tenants that have communicated with us that they can't pay the rent. There are conditions on those deferrals. They're not blanket deferrals. And so a tenant needs, when they ask for deferral, they need to demonstrate to us that they've done their best to apply for the PPP and EIDL programs and commit that the funds allocated for rent reimbursement will be directed to the landlord once they receive those funds. And if we have open communication with the tenant, we have not had one situation where we've had to say, or else, meaning you don't pay, we start eviction proceedings. And we wouldn't do that at this particular time unless the tenant was non-communicative to us and just ignoring our requests for input on why you're not paying the rent. So between the people that we employ to keep facilities safe, clean, and efficient, we can't do that without the rent dollars that flow in. Mm-hmm. And so it's a real stretch to try to keep those services in place and keep the mortgages paid if people aren't paying their rent.
That makes sense. Yeah.
In the majority of our clients that are non-retail, everyone's paying their rent. The retail industry, someone passed a memo around in the retail world that said, your rich landlord can do without your rent, just don't pay. And I'm not saying that about any of the retailers that are on this call, but I'm talking about national retailers that have credit rankings with Dun & Bradstreet and other credit organizations that have called us up or emailed us blanket emails saying we won't be paying rent for the next 4 months. And our response to that is we need to talk. Because we need to talk.
I think too I think there's been some advice that has been dispensed that is, I appreciate where some businesses are, but at the same time, this is a deferral, right? This is, they talk to folks about deferring personal payments like a car payment or a rent for 3 months. But, if your mortgage is $1,000 a month on the fourth month, you're going to owe $4,000, So I don't know that people are really paying attention to that, probably because the words forgiveness have cropped up in so much of the government's, so many of their programs. But you're absolutely right. And, that's a challenge. It sounds like you guys have figured out to deal with that situationally on a one-on-one basis, which is obviously the best way to do that, right?
We're trying.
That's it. Good deal. Gretchen, how about you? Your business has certainly changed an awful lot. So share with us, I guess, what's probably been a much more difficult path.
Sure. So obviously with the loss of revenue, like many in our industry, we had to make the difficult decision to furlough a number of staff a few weeks ago. And as a leader in any organization, our people are our best assets. And so that was obviously a difficult decision, but one that was kind of required because of trying to look at the long-term viability of our organization. And so we're a smaller staff, but probably working harder than we ever have. A couple of other changes. Personally, I started weekly industry communications just to provide updates and some of the research and information that we have available to us from the national level, and keep an open line of communication with all of our partners. And that weekly industry update started on week 1 in early March. Knowing that our primary partners in the hotel and restaurant industries were being hit especially hard, our commission did create some flexible payment options, much like some of the others have mentioned, that included waiving penalty and late payments during this crisis time period and creating some deferment payment plans for our taxpayers. Our sales team continues to conduct weekly calls with our hotel partners and properties to touch base. We also put together and sent out several hundred care packages to our meeting professionals across the country because they're going to be instrumental in our rebound when we're ready and when convention and group business does come back. Our marketing team has certainly pivoted. We've paused most of our paid advertising. We've adjusted messaging. We've created resource pages for our residents, along with some fun stay-in activities to give people a little bit of a respite from all of the COVID-related news. And those stay-in activities range from downloadable coloring book pages to bingo cards and digital puzzles, personalized Zoom backgrounds like the one I'm using today, and a variety of virtual tours and exhibits from our museum and attraction partners. Additionally, we're promoting some volunteer opportunities, and we launched a fundraising campaign to sell our popular Big on Little Rock t-shirts, and those proceeds are going toward local COVID relief efforts. And all of that information can be found on our website at littlerock.com. So we're certainly continuing to adjust in this temporary normal environment.
You know what they say, necessity is a mother, right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's great. Awesome. That's terrific. Well, obviously, the furloughing of people's not a good thing, but it sounds like you guys are making every creative effort to make people's, not just those who are visiting, but also those who are residents more comfortable. Sure. Jack, you've shared some things with us that you've certainly changed. Anything else you want to add to that? And then I've got my next question for Laura.
Sure. Well, I mean, for us, our biggest pivot has been, two things. Going to curbside only is just a complete foundational change for our business. And so we're just trying to build new systems on the fly to accommodate that. And then we've also changed over to grocery. There was a zoning ordinance, I think it was, that was lifted that allowed us to function as a grocery store as well as a restaurant. And that's been a really big deal for us. I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but we were planning to start doing that anyway, because we have so many farmers that supply us that don't have another outlet for their products. An egg producer that we've committed to buying a certain number of eggs from. And when we stop selling them, his chickens don't stop laying. So we felt like the pivot to grocery happened really naturally for us. But I think it's also filled or met a demand that we didn't know was going to be there. Since we've changed over in the last 5 weeks, the grocery side has accounted for 39% of our sales. And this is a part of our business that didn't even exist 5 weeks ago. So it's just been a complete change. And, to go along with that, like physically, we've had to reorganize the space in a pretty major way just to process those orders efficiently. So if you came into the Root dining room right now, I mean, it looks totally different. There, there's like to-go containers stacked everywhere and, easy access. We've borrowed fridges and freezers from different places to hold ice cream and meat and things like that close at hand that we normally have, way back in the back. We've seen a great response from the community, which has been really nice. And I think as a business, it's helped us kind of stay relevant and have something unique and interesting to offer. So, a lot of places are saying, come get lunch with us, but, we're able to offer lunch and a quart of strawberries or, a pint of loblolly ice cream, some veggies from some of our different farmers. And that's really made a huge difference for us. I mentioned earlier before the call really started, strawberries have been our number one seller since we started this. We get them from Barnhill Orchards. It's been an incredible strawberry season, but we've gone through about 500 pounds of strawberries at this point that we're retailing to customers. So that's been huge. We are going to start selling War Eagle Mill flour and other grains next Tuesday. We're selling toilet paper and gloves, disposable gloves. I mean, a lot of this for us is just kind of like, when we hear that you can't get eggs at the grocery store, you can't get flour at the grocery store or toilet paper, we think, we can get those things. And, then it just becomes a kind of a natural business move to start offering those to our retail customers. So one other change that we've made as a business that I think has been helpful is that we've streamlined our hours. The Root, we've always been a little quirky and done things a little differently. And, our hours in the past were like, Tuesday through Friday had one set of hours, except we didn't do dinner on Tuesday. And then, Saturday was different and brunch only on Sunday. And for this, we've just decided to go Tuesday through Sunday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we feel like that's an important thing just because, the ability to communicate with customers at this point is so limited. We've just got to simplify the message and and blast it out as loudly and as often as we can. So we feel like just having simple hours is an easy way to do that.
Thank you. That's great. That's great stuff. And we work with a lot of early stage companies, as you guys know, and one of the things that we try to do is to help them. Sometimes it's a small adjustment on the rudder that helps them increase their speed or trajectory, right? Sometimes just that little tap. And I always like the expression, we can't always control the wind, but we can adjust the sails. And it's delightful the way you guys are doing just that, all of you. It's fascinating. Millie, I didn't really get a chance to ask you that question before moving on about what has Stone Ward done to change or offer any new services or recommendations to their clients.
Well, as you can imagine, we're doing a lot of crisis communications for our clients. And I think one of the things that we've seen through this is that there is crisis good communications for those that can find the opportunities. And then there is crisis bad communications for those who are struggling or finding their businesses to be struggling. And we've had large questions that we're trying to answer. What is the future of sports? We have a couple of sports clients. They're major and national. They're trying to figure it out. So we've been really upping our game on helping our clients take full advantage of the digital spaces. We've taken a couple of them who did not have strong e-commerce platforms and gotten them up and running and helping them be much more aggressive in that channel. So I think that for us, it's not changed what we're doing, but it has very much changed what our clients need to have done, one to the other. We have a couple of clients looking at their brands to just understand if they're relevant. And I Gretchen says temporary normal. I'm saying new normal because I think that the studies will tell us that there are a lot of things about what we're doing right now that are going to stick. And the business models for almost every client we have will be altered in some way, probably including our own. So we have an innovation team inside our company, and they are looking at those opportunities for each client that we have and for Stone Ward, because I think that it's not going to be the same. When we come out of this, everybody's going to be rethinking their own models and then how they're communicating those models. And we want to be ready for that.
That's great. Thanks, Millie. Well, I think we've reached one consensus here that none of us want this to be the normal at any cost, right?
That's right. That's right.
Laura, I'd like to ask you the question about what we now refer to as WFH, which is working from home, right? And how you've deployed that and how that's changed the way your workforce is functioning and so forth. Obviously, you have a large remote workforce who is out there climbing poles and keeping us in light internet business today. But how has that affected your decisions? It's harder to hold people accountable. Obviously, they're home. They got kids to teach. There's all kinds of issues with that. What has been your experience with that?
That's a good question. So just putting the field employees aside, we have quite a large workforce, all working from home, telecommuting, and for better or for worse, our company is no stranger to being displaced. With Hurricane Katrina back in 2004, essentially our entire corporate business support service group in New Orleans was evacuated, and for quite some time because of the damage. But what we've seen that's different here is technology has advanced tremendously since then. And so we are a very highly functional group of employees through the technology. Everybody's able to work from home. We've had to get internet service at some employees' house, but we do a lot of work on platforms like this through virtual meetings. And like many of you have probably experienced, there's an emotional toll that takes on employees after time has gone by. It's settling in, and it affects everybody differently. So for me, I've got 3 kids at home that I'm homeschooling. I've got a full-time job. My husband's still going into the office every day. Well, that's a very different experience for some of our employees that are perhaps single and more reliant on the work environment to get that daily interaction. So we're trying to be mindful of everybody's differences as we're all telecommuting. And one of the things that I think is a silver lining to being in a remote environment is that it's almost brought us closer in that we are now talking to each other in a way in each other's living rooms, in their offices, in their homes. And so it's taken, folks from all across the company into a more vulnerable situation, and then seeing each other, and that we're all in this together. We're all facing the same challenges. We either all are got the homeschooling issue, or we've got the dog barking in the background, or whatever it is that the challenge is. Everybody from the CEO of the corporation down to the call center agents are experiencing the exact same thing. And so there is a sense of closeness that has been brought, that brings us all together through that collective experience. But we've also, because we do have the field employees that are going out and risking their lives every day while we are at home working, we've got to be mindful of the impact to them, so that there's not, too much of a focus on the telecommuters, and there's an equal amount of focus that they're getting the same level of support being in the field every day. And we communicate with them on a regular basis through radio. So it's important to make sure they're getting the equal amount of support.
You think it?
Great.
You think it will be? Will you make different decisions about where your workforce is moving forward? Do you think? I mean, like I said, I'm Hank and I were talking earlier. I like to see my team, in the office every day, and maybe I'm a little old-fashioned that way, and I'll probably rethink that a little bit. This is different.
The collaboration piece of it. So we have engineers that work together on drawings and plans, and it's very hard to do that virtually. And so, as soon as we are able to make safe environments for them, we will do so, so that we can get that collaboration from seeing each other and working on a hands-on project as soon as we're able. But safety and the health of our employees will be first in that decision making.
Gotcha. Thanks. Hank, your team is, as you said, pretty remote. Millie, you've certainly had your team move into a remote situation.
Yeah.
Any thoughts around that at all, as far as how that's affecting you, and how are you managing your culture associated with that as well?
I think that's a really good question and an important one. And I think, much to follow Laura's, I think if you have a strong culture to begin with, I mean, Stoneward is blessed to have a really strong culture, and we're a close group, and we love being with each other, and we are a community. We are an extended family in many ways. So we miss not seeing each other. I mean, we have some great technology. It's doing what it needs to for us to communicate and to work virtually, but it's not the same as seeing everyone. I think we will be more flexible probably going back. We'll probably have to be, because, again, what Laura spoke to with the kids, we don't know when our kids are going to be able to do anything besides stay at home. So our employees with kids have to work that out. And I think that it just makes you appreciate and feel closer to your group when you're working in this situation. It is more personal, but I think in a good way, and it does allow you to recognize quicker if someone's struggling, and I think that is important too. So I think it will be good for strong cultures, and it's harder on those cultures that are struggling a little bit.
I would agree. I think we started off the first week. The first day we had a phone call. The second day we had a phone call. The third day we were on Zoom, and and it really did make a difference for us, because like y'all, we like each other, and we like looking at each other and talking to each other, and it is part of the spirit of who we are. So that goes without saying. Next, I'd like to ask any of you who we talked a little bit, obviously, to Jack as it relates to this. Have any of the balance of you applied for any of the loans that the emergency loans or the PPP loans? And if so, what has been your experience with that?
Wayne, I don't.
We have three. Go ahead, Hank. No, Hank, go ahead.
I was going to say, yes, we've applied not only for our own company, but we've applied for clients that own properties that are eligible to file under EIDL for rental loss, following the discussions that I had earlier about the retail tenants that for some part are not paying their rent. And we've helped clients do that. We've asked the tenants that have asked for deferral to file their own applications. And in some cases, we've helped those tenants go through the process. I asked my son, Nicholas, who's an attorney that works right beside me, to study the regulations quickly and not be a legal advisor to anyone, but just help our customers and our clients and our tenants cut through the process to facilitate their application. And he also helped facilitate our application. That being said, I'm on the edge of my seat wondering if we're going to be in the second tier of funding that is being processed right now through the PPP program. And if you look at our 70 employees, there are approximately 6 to 7 of us here working, but about 90% of our employees are actually performing tasks from home. There's probably 10% of our employees that we haven't been able to really give meaningful work to, but we haven't laid them off, and we won't lay them off as long as we've got $1 in our bank account. And so the PPP program, when it comes through, will ensure that even if we're in a stay-at-home position for 2 more months or 3 more months, it's our goal to not lay anyone off if we can avoid it, because we know it's so hard to replace that person that's trained and is customer service oriented and is ready, willing, and able to come back to work when they can. We don't want to lose the relationship with that person, even if we have to subsidize their existence. So the PPP program for us, if it's funded to us, will really help us get down the road a couple of months and not have to do any furloughing or any layoffs, even though we could cut our staff in half right now if it was based upon work demand and what was required to be done based upon what's going on.
Mm-hmm. That's great stuff.
Well, I was going to also say, Wayne, that, the Venture Center is all about fintech, and you guys have the greatest appreciation of community banks as well as the large, more global banks. But I think the banks in Arkansas stepped up at every level. The community banks, the banks that have multi-state operations, and we have 3 companies that we were working on loan applications for, and I have 3 friends who work for 3 different banks, and all of them were working literally 24 hours a day, and probably will be again now that the second half has been funded.
Yep.
24 hours a day to help their companies get those loans. And it was not easy. There was a lot of vagueness in all of the application process. And as Jack said, the whole what is forgivable is now becoming a bigger and bigger question. So I think a lot of people who applied for those loans are going to be asking now, how much of it should I really use if I can make it a different way, because we don't know what that's going to be like. I think it's going to be very political. So, but I think that the bankers on the ground here in Arkansas are heroes, and there are thousands. I think I heard 10,000. Somebody on the call may have a right number, but thousands of companies in Arkansas who've already had their loans funded. And that just would not have happened without those banks, Regions and Simmons and Bank of the Ozarks, people that I know, and I'm sure the others, RVS, you name them, coming to the aid of their customers and a lot of people who weren't their customers to get those loans through. So I think we owe a big thank you to our fintech people, to our financial people who, have been figuring all that out.
Yeah, it's interesting because we'll be making an announcement, I think, here in the next couple of days. We're gonna be playing an active role in kind of a national, really what's going to end up being a showcase of potential solutions for the next stage of this, because we have access to so many of these fintech solutions, and we're working with the ICBA actually and an organization called AIR, and we started to go down that path to be helpful with the PPP loans. But by the time we would have gotten through that cycle, what would have happened already. So they actually managed through that pretty well. But there's a whole other set of challenges on the backside of these loans, which is making sure that the banks can do what we call perfect these loans, which is maintain them, make sure that people are given the proper guidance. that they're able to get the forgiveness as required and so forth. So the good news is that all the technology exists. It just needs to be tweaked a little bit to address these concerns for the banks, because they really do want to get out of the business of having to manage these loans and so forth. But yeah, Millie, you nailed it. Every banker I have spoken to in the last 10 or 15 days has been working 24/7 without question. And also, we talked to somebody like Noah Wilcox, who's the executive director now of the executive chairman rather of the ICBA, and the challenges he's experienced and what have you. So it's been remarkable what they have done. As I suggest, they are the ventilators for small business right now, and hopefully they'll
absolutely.
Hopefully they get the second tranche out there pretty quickly. Being respectful of time, we've got about 30 minutes left. I want to ask one more question of the group, and then I think Ashley would probably guide me into opening the floor for some questions here from the audience. I think we've got about 70 or 80 people who've joined us today. Ultimately, it's been up and down a little bit, but and it was sort of a question I asked earlier. And let me go ahead, Jack. I'll start with you. How do you think your business will look different when we do get back to whatever normal we're going to cause? Do you think your business will look different? Do you think you will act different? Do you think you will provide different services? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, that's a big topic of conversation right now, and I think it's a positive thing that we are actually looking forward. I think as a business and as a society, I'm seeing more and more articles about what the future is going to look like. For the route, it's curbside is already an industry trend in chain restaurants that use technology a lot of times more effectively than the smaller restaurants. But it seems like it's something that we may have to embrace, where if this hadn't happened, we might not have needed to pivot like that. But it does seem like curbside might be one of these things that doesn't go away. And then the grocery, offering grocery as part of what we do, it has seemed like a natural fit for a long time, and it's something we've talked about in the past. But now that we kind of have been forced to just get it up and running on the fly, it might be something that we maintain once this is over. And not exactly sure how that'll work and how it'll fit into our existing business model. I suggested to some of our staff, like, let's think about how to incorporate that. And we had a kind of a laugh about, if you've ever seen the route, like at noon on a Saturday, and, the sort of, full dining room and a line, and there's, a lot of chaos that's already going on, and trying to throw groceries into the mix, it's could be challenging. But at the same time, if there's a demand for it, we want to find a way to offer that to our customers and to the community, because, local groceries, I think about this sometimes, like in the middle of the week, if I'm going to cook home and I want to get a local chicken or a dozen eggs from a local farmer, there's really not a place to do that. And it feels like we have the opportunity to offer that, and pretty streamlined because of our existing relationships with farmers. So those are a couple of big things. As we look forward, just the uncertainty around consumer behavior, I think, is our biggest concern, because we just don't know how people are going to react. If the governor said dining rooms could open tomorrow, some statistics I've seen have suggested that about 12% of people feel that their dining habits regarding restaurants may have changed permanently. That's pretty concerning to think about, that big a segment maybe not going back to dining in. I think there's only about 25% of people are saying that they would go right back to restaurants, with no hesitation. That's a really small number. And then, the rest of that, I think it was 67%, said that they would dine out cautiously and kind of, re-engage in going to restaurants in a sort of a phased system that's going to, revolve around things like, better testing being available, potentially a vaccine being available. So, for us, it's really, we have to plan day to day, and just, I think once these rules are lifted, see how it affects us as a business, try to feel things out very cautiously.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, it's what we all love about the root is not just obviously the food and the things that you do there, but the experience, right?
Right.
And you sort of that gets ripped away in this process. So you can't have, there is the wonderful ambiance that you are at the root and at Mockingbird as well, where we frequent both places. So, Phil, what about you? You going to continue to make hand sanitizer indefinitely? I mean, and I don't say that as a joke, but seriously, I mean, that's
that's a definite possibility. We could be in that business for quite a while. I mean, we were lucky enough to get a PPP loan a couple of weeks ago, and our local community bank was very quick to process that. And this whole question of forgivability now that's starting to come up. But we don't know what the future is going to be.
Right.
Businesses are getting them that may not need them today, but what are we going to need 8 weeks from now, 12 weeks
Right.
from now, 32 weeks from now? And so that has me a little bit concerned. But, what our business looks like in the future, I, am optimistic in thinking that eventually we come up with treatments and testing and ways to mitigate to where we can achieve some sort of return to normalcy. And that's my hope. But in the short term, I don't really know what that's going to look like. So,
well, we'll invite everyone on this call to happy hour at your place when this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody gets a shot on me for sure.
And I'll buy the second shot. How's that?
Fair enough.
I'm trying to think who else would, any Laura or Hank or anybody else want to add to that. And then I think if that's the case, then love to hear your comments on how things might be changing at Entergy moving through this, Laura.
Well, again, I think it's too soon to tell. There are certain things that we cannot do remotely, and we've talked about those already. We've got facilities that need operators behind the control rooms, and they will continue to do that within the facilities themselves. But to the extent that we have been sort of forced into new innovative ways of working for those that are able, it's not inconceivable that we wouldn't try and capitalize on that as much as we can. And to Millie's point earlier, see what flexibility we can offer our employees now. And then the same goes for our customers. We had, before the pandemic, we're looking at ways to offer new payment arrangements for our low income customers that were struggling. And so this has sort of accelerated that effort. And I think those types of things may be things that stick. So that's what I'd have to offer.
Wayne, one other thing I would like to say before we get off this call is I think that this has given almost everyone a greater sense of gratitude for all the things that we have to be grateful for in this world. And, when you strip down a lot of the things that we're used to and the schedules that we're used to, it just reminds us of how important our relationships with each other are in our companies, in our communities, with our nonprofits, all of those very personal and important things. So I'm hoping that one thing that will change, that has changed, that I think will stick for a while, is that maybe all of us will have a renewed sense of gratitude, but also a renewed sense of community, and perhaps be more willing to do what we can to help others in our community thrive, and to know that it may take all of us thinking about some different things and doing some different things. I know Stone Ward is more than prepared to do that, to help people actually figure out how they're going to thrive, how we are going to go forward in the next few months, and then as we move to the end of the year. So I think we can't forget that sense of gratitude and community that this is created, that we would all like to keep a piece of if we could.
Millie, I
just
thank
to
you
add,
for that.
I'd say the interdependency has been an eye-opening for all of us,
Yes.
too. The interdependency of all of our organizations that are impacted.
Absolutely.
No, I agree. I also am little disappointed that none of us are driving, but gas is under $2, right? That's something else.
Wayne, could I add one thing to Millie's
Please,
comment about
Hank.
gratitude? And so I'm in a Rotary Club this year, and Ken Clark is a counselor that gave a program to us, to our Rotary Club, a couple of weeks into the pandemic. We asked him to come and speak to our club about what we could do mentally to try to get through this, not knowing how long it is. And he told us that gratitude and fear cannot live in the same space in your mind. And so if you can fill your mind at the first of every day with the smallest things that you're grateful for, and if you wake up in the morning and before you take on the first stressful item, fill your mind with thoughts of gratitude, he said, you will be amazed at how much better you feel and how you will lose the fear that you have to move forward. And our members in our Rotary Club have gone through and listed, it's just like a physical exercise. We've listed the things we're most grateful for on a regular basis to help us each week by week think about how we can recharge our battery to keep doing what we're doing.
Man, that's great. We all have our faith and the right attitude, and listen, most of us who are speaking today or are part of this panel have the good fortune of fewer worries than others, I think, to some degree and some capacity. But I think Millie's point and Laura's point too is, what I love about Little Rock is the community. I love you all. You are a wonderful people. I'm a transplant. I've been there be 3 years May 1st, and I've never lived any place quite like Little Rock in Arkansas where people put their arms around you and care about you the way you all do. It's really something special, and I am grateful for that. But I couldn't agree with you more. I love the way you put it, Hank, that both fear and gratitude cannot share that same space. And hopefully others on this call have heard what you've had to say today, and we'll deploy that and take the time to we're going to rely on our faith a little bit, but also look at the things that we should be grateful for. We will get through this. We all know that. Right. What we will be doing at the end of this, as I think Laura, Millie, and all of us have said today, we're uncertain. And I think that's what creates the anxiety of today, is the uncertainty of tomorrow, right?
Yes.
And of course, and the other thing, nobody wants to be sick. But I also believe, personally, and I'll say this for myself, not for Venture Center, that there will be things that we come through, and as we have in all great crises, that will be better and will be stronger, and will renew the direction, because just the things like forced adoption that has occurred here in so many ways, right? So I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it is not the oncoming train. I believe that for sure. So. All right. That being said, thank you. Let me just, Gretchen and Phil, Millie, Hank, Jack, Laura, thank you all. Do any of you want to make any sort of a closing statement before we open it up for some questions? We've got about 20 minutes left for that, but I want to make sure all of you, Hank, just like Hank's comments, if there's things that you think will help inspire others and give us the right perspective, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Wayne, I'll jump in real quick, because you asked me earlier on the kind of recovery and rebuild, and we're seeing a lot of research that comes out of that. So just to kind of end on a little bit of a brighter note, with that light at the end of the tunnel, we're seeing lots and lots of data that suggests that people will travel again. They're anxious to get back out and experience life again. No doubt life is going to be a little different. We are all implementing changes, and a lot of those changes will stick. But we're seeing that kind of immediate drive back to life and travel is going to be more community-based. It's going to be more staycations. It's going to be more short drive trips. And we think that Little Rock is really well positioned to capitalize on a lot of that, because we have hundreds of thousands of people that live within kind of a 5-mile radius. and we've got some wonderful amenities to offer people, from outdoor adventure to a lot less congestion than some major metropolitan areas that have really been hotspots during this pandemic. And then we also have great museums and attractions. So I think we're already starting to work on messaging and being prepared to try to capitalize on that. But I do feel like Little Rock and even the state of Arkansas is going to be in a good position to rebound maybe a little quicker from a tourism aspect than many other of our counterparts around the country. So
awesome.
a little bit of
I'd also suggest that we make that open carry for alcohol available. Why don't we do the whole region now, right? So that's just a thought. I'll throw it out there. So.
I think a lot of people are going to want the liquor delivery to continue.
Yeah, I'm sure Phil has an opinion on that topic for sure.
We need to ship as well. So, yeah.
There you go. Well, thanks. Hey, a couple of questions here. Let's see. Are there any tips or things business owners can do to address changes and the hesitation of clients? I think what that person's asking, it's a great question, is, we talked, and I think, Jack, you nailed this a little bit too, is, I have to admit that I'm not the guy who's going to probably want to head out to a restaurant next week, let alone a movie. I guess the question is, how do we begin to get our customers, give them some level of confidence that they should come out again, right? That they should travel again, that they should come out to eat, that they should go to a Razorbacks game or see the latest Star Wars. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's one thing that definitely seems to some degree to be out of businesses' hands. I think most research right now suggests that people are going to trust healthcare professionals, their primary care physicians. Those seem to be the most trusted sources for when it's okay to go out and resume life as normal, or whatever that ends up being after this is over. With that said, I think every industry probably has certain things that they can adopt and promote as tactics that they're going to take on. For restaurants specifically, we're looking at potentially doing away with the communal beverage station. That just seems like it might be something that turns people off going forward. I've heard other people say, the restaurants talk about communal condiment stations where you fill up your own ketchup or something like that. That people are going to want to have less of that kind of thing. We've talked about whether or not it makes sense to continue being a counter service place in the daytime. That is something that may turn people off, the idea that they have to stand in line. Taking a number of tables out of the dining room. But I think it's like every industry is so different. And, as a small business owner, it's kind of part of the game. You just have to figure out what is going to be right for your industry going forward. And, within your industry, even just your business model in particular, what's going to work and, what's going to resonate with consumers, what market opportunities there might be after this is over that weren't there before, and, trying to move quickly to fill those voids.
I think the other thing I would say to small businesses especially is they are going to have to communicate in ways that they haven't before, and more often, more frequently, and listen to their customers better too. I think in a small business, the advantage you have is you know who your customers are oftentimes, and particularly the ones who are loyal or are thought leaders for you. And I think you really, as we go forward, as we kind of inch our way into a more open environment, then those small businesses are going to have to really, really listen to their customers, see and watch how they react to these new things as we sort of roll them out, and then be willing to adapt quickly to what they're learning. Much faster maybe than any of us have ever done that before. And then communicate regularly that those things are happening. I think that two-way communication with your customers, in particular for a small business, is going to be vitally important to getting back out there successfully.
Do you think that that there will be a third party that will bless these things? I mean, obviously there's the government, there's the health department, there's those sort of things. But, I remember growing up in Pennsylvania where we had sanitation ratings on the restaurants, and there was an A, a B, or a C, or a D, or an E. So there was a little square that they put on the front window of the restaurant so you knew the level of sanitation, right? So I wonder if things like that will present themselves moving forward with public places that suggest that they have a certain level of safety or procedures that will help give confidence to consumers to want to go to those places, right? So
I don't know if it will be official regulations like that, but we're working with a lot of our national associations within our markets because we manage so many large-scale event facilities, right? And we fully anticipate there are going to be changes in how we manage those events moving forward. The large-scale event facilities were kind of the first ones to close, and we're probably going to be the last to reopen because of the nature of what we operate. And we're already having conversations. Many years ago, the norm wasn't to walk through a metal detector for a ticketed event. Now it is. You walk through a metal detector, you have your bag checked. That's just kind of new standard procedure. We anticipate there will be more new standard procedures coming out of this, at the very base level, having widespread availability of hand sanitizer and a lot more frequency of cleaning the public touch points. Those things are going to obviously stick, but we think there will be some other rules and regulations, or at least strongly suggested guidelines in order to be successful. And we're having those conversations now. And we're also being asked to pull together some of that national research and provide to some of these task force so that they can review these with our healthcare providers and our healthcare experts in order to give us feedback to say, these are the 3 items that are most important and you need to implement them. These 2 won't be as important once we get out of this phasing process. So we're working through that now.
it's interesting how the value of certain positions change in times of crisis. Look at how we've always thought highly of the professionals in the healthcare field, but we're thinking obviously differently about them today. But even someone in a janitorial role today, who we think of sometimes as, those people are everyone's important, but how much more important are they today, optically and so forth. But interesting stuff. Hank, there was a question someone posed here that said, has the city or the state talked about adding these deferral payments to the end of the lease agreement as opposed to at the end of a deferral period? In other words, I guess sort of like we've done in mortgages, which is done sometimes, right?
So Wayne, most of my activity is more commercially oriented. We do have some boutique apartments that we handle, but we're not in the rental housing arena as much as some other firms are. But I'll speak to the tenants. Once again, it's on a tenant by tenant basis. We don't subscribe to a blanket solution across the board for the issues that are at hand. But any tenant that communicates with us a need and a desire to defer will be well received with some conditions associated with that. And in many cases, we've taken as much as 4 months of deferral and added term to their lease to make up for that, and the deferral be paid off over years rather than months. It really depends on the industry they're in, what their condition is, and how we can help solve the problem for them. And the goal is in every case of those discussions is to not disrupt occupancy or the business that's there. We will not be able to replace the businesses that go out anytime soon. So
thank you. That has been a clear message today here, is that everybody is collaborating to help uplift others and make them successful at this time. Because if there's failure in any part of that value chain, it hurts everyone, right? So that's great, Hank. Thank you. The last question, which is an absolutely terrific question, and let me start with Phil. What has this pandemic taught you professionally and personally? That is a strong question right there. So.
Oh man, yeah. I don't know. Let's see. What has it taught me professionally and personally? I guess that, there's more to this than just, me trying to make vodka and sell it. And that the idea that we're able to find a way to pivot and do something good, and still stay alive as a business because of that, is just makes it all even better. And to piggyback on what Hank was saying, I've all along been saying I need to have an attitude of gratitude. And so I try to start my day with that attitude, and try to instill in my people that attitude of gratitude, and that every interaction that we have with a customer, be it for hand sanitizer or spirits, is a chance to build a brand advocate for the future. And so we're trying to, always keep that in mind, and do our best for our customers in our community. And, on a personal level, we're just working as hard as we possibly can to do the best job we possibly can. And, we've made personal sacrifices because of that. And hopefully, there's light at the end of the tunnel where we'll all get to rest at some point.
You bet. You bet. Gretchen, how about you?
Yeah. So I think now more than ever, I've become even more thankful and more grateful for having a really, really strong group of people and staff around me. But I think personally what I've learned is you got to be flexible. You got to be creative, look for partnerships, and every once in a while, just find a chance to breathe. Take a moment to just take a deep breath.
Yeah, that's for sure. Laura, how about you?
Well, professionally, and thinking through work and what it is we do for a living, it is that failure is not an option. And so my workforce has really taken the when there's a will, there's a way attitude, and continue to move forward, because failure is not an option, both metaphorically and physically. So they continue to work for that. But when I think about the second part of that question, I think it's both a professional and a personal answer. And there was a Forbes article, many of you may have read it, about this pandemic and the gaslighting effect of it. And within that article was the notion that we have just been given the great pause. Mm-hmm. The great pause is something, I'm 47, I'll confess that I have never had in my lifetime, my parents have never had, in the way that we're seeing it now. And so there's an opportunity to look at life pre-COVID and post-COVID and put back together the pieces of the pre-COVID life that will work in your post-COVID emotional state. And I personally need to reevaluate the treadmill that I have been on, and whether there are parts of that exercise that should continue after this great pause. So I'll leave it at that.
That's extraordinary advice, and we know much about you and the challenges that you have had, and clearly it starts with great leadership, and you are a great leader. So thank you for that. That's awesome stuff. Really good stuff. Hank, any closing thoughts on that? Or
yes, if you'll excuse me 1 second. So during the good times, this little mantra, clean, efficient, and reliable, was in our office, but it somehow or another got to the back of the office because we were so busy doing deals and doing other things. And now it sits at my desk where I look at it every day. And the focus that I have, and then hopefully our team has, is a very simple concept of, in the services we provide and the facilities that we take care of, we're clean, we're efficient, and we're reliable. And if I can just focus on those three things and drive our services around that, whether it's a lease negotiation or a floor in a facility, or an elevator or an escalator, or an automatic door that opens or doesn't open, or a roof that doesn't leak. If I can focus on being clean, efficient, and reliable, then we'll do fine. And on a relative basis, we'll survive, we'll prosper, and we'll thrive. And that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. That's awesome. Jack, how about you? And then Millie, I'm going to let you wrap it up. Jack, what do you think?
Yeah. For me, I think professionally, it's been a realization that we're all interconnected, that the community is so important, and that's both the community that we serve, but also our restaurant community. I'm really fortunate to be part of this group of restaurant owners that meets once a month, and we've had our last 2 meetings via Zoom. But it's just a few guys that are with different restaurants around town and are able to offer great advice, connections. They're able to offer their perspective on how they've navigated things like the PPP or help their staff with unemployment and things like that. And every time I get off that kind of call, I just feel so inspired and relieved that I'm not doing this alone. That there are other people out there that are in the same situation, and that I've managed to connect with them in a way that's meaningful. When I remember when we first opened, I felt such a need to prove myself. Just that the route was good enough to survive on its own, and I really resisted the idea of asking people for advice. I'd never reach out to another chef and ask them for a recipe. And now I look back at that and I just think, man, the hours I wasted. Now I'll just text someone and say, hey, I'm trying to think of a good idea for something, and just love it when they text me back, and it saves me 2 hours. So I think realizing how dependent we are on our surrounding community, that's a really big deal. Personally, I think this has really brought into relief for me. There are some things that I'm good at and some things that I'm not good at, and reminded me that it's good for me to spend my time focusing on the things I'm good at, and figure out the ways that I work well in a crisis, and then to admit to myself and my team the things that I'm not great at, and make sure that I delegate those things to somebody who is good at those things. So we have an incredible staff here, and a lot of times the only thing holding me back, or holding the route back, is my unwillingness to turn things over to people who are more competent than I am at certain things. So with the grocery, it's a great example where that was an idea that originated with my wife and me, as we talked about, like, what are we going to do to support our farmers during this time. But that was sort of our part in it, was to generate that idea and then turn it over to our staff, who have they've totally reshaped the point of sale system and the physical layout of the dining room, and all the systems that allow us to efficiently make those steps happen so that we can get the groceries to people who want to order them. That's been our amazing staff, 100%. And it's been an interesting thing for me to sort of watch my own process in this. I think I'm finally getting comfortable. It's like week 5, but I just don't handle big changes that well or that quickly. And so I'm just now starting to kind of find my rhythm in all of this, and put my to-do list in just the right place so that I actually get it done day to day. So that's been kind of just a fun thing to recognize. And I guess everyone's getting this chance to sort of look at themselves in relief in a different way and learn those things about themselves.
Absolutely. Thanks. Millie, we got about a minute left, and then I'm going to just turn things over back to Ashley, and she'll give us a quick wrap up here. So Millie, your thoughts? And that was great, Jack. Thank you.
Well, I will say that professionally, I think this has reminded me and so many others of how fragile our economy is, and how fragile we are as companies, and the assumptions that we've made are really don't have much foundation. We really have to look at things. But I think personally, I can't help it. I'm a social animal. So I miss my friends. I miss my supper club. I miss my Sunday school class. I miss my preacher. I miss members of my family that I haven't seen in a while. I want to get I'm ready to be close to them in a physical way. It is one thing to look at a computer screen, and that is nice, but it is not the same, you know. And even if I can't give a hug, I just want to be able to look them in the eyes and tell them I love them. And I think that's, for all of us personally, that's probably the biggest thing we've learned, and how the biggest thing we'll appreciate coming out of this.
You bet. You bet. Well, I can't thank you all enough for your authenticity, your heartfelt insights, and your willingness to continue to support what we try to do in our mission at the Venture Center. And we have your backs. If there's anything we can do, all of you, and I'm grateful, and we will, and we do try to lead with that attitude of gratitude every day. So thank you all. This has been insightful and inspiring, and once again, very, very grateful. Actually, let me turn it back to you, and I think we have some things coming up at the Venture Center. We'd love to hear about that, please.
Absolutely. Just to echo Wayne's sentiment, huge thank you to Millie and Phil and Laura and Hank and Gretchen and Jack for your insight on this topic and being willing to share all this information. Very valuable right now. Again, we do want to host one of these again next Friday. We've got it set up. Feel free to register for that. We'll see you again then. A huge thank you to our sponsors, right, Lindsay Jennings, Frost, and of course the Chamber. And our chairman of the board, James Hendren, did want to take a quick second to announce the audience. So I'll give you a quick 15 to 30 seconds, James, if you will, announce what you got.
Thank you, Ashley. I just wanted to comment and remind us that, the country and the world has been through these kind of events before. If you look at the Spanish flu, most of y'all are old enough, but the polio, kids were not allowed to go swimming. They got kept home from school. They didn't go out in groups. So we can look back through history and see how our country did recover from those things. And I'm sure there were significant differences in the lifestyle, but I think we need to stay these, but at the same time, things are going to be different, but it's not all negative out there. So everybody have a great weekend and stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Big thanks to our participants as well. Everybody have a fantastic weekend, and we hope to see you again soon.
Y'all go wash your hands now, okay?
Okay. Bye-bye.
Right.
Thanks a lot, y'all.
Take care.